Hello there. So we're going to do things a little differently this evening. I'm on crutches. My knee's getting better, but it's really kind of impossible for me to walk around on. So I'm going to do this from my desk. I've already made an incense offering because I don't want to have to get up and hobble on crutches over there. So anyway, glad to see you all here. Hope you had a good day and are having a good week. Like my new robes? Yeah, it's cold in here and I don't want to have to go get my robes. So verse of the Kesa. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. It's an interesting look. Gata of Atonement. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. So as I said, I made an incense offering on my way to my desk. So we will forego that. Homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sambuddhassa. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I shall become one with the Buddha. I resolve that I shall each day follow the way of life he laid down for us to walk and awaken to his supreme wisdom. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I shall become one with the Dharma. The gates of Dharma are manifold. I vow to enter them all. The goal of wisdom is ever beyond. I shall attain it. I go to the Sangha for guidance. I shall become one with the Sangha. In the spirit of universal fellowship and as a member of the Sangha, I pledge myself to strive for the enlightenment of all beings. The Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into the world of suffering. May I be happy and well. May no harm come to me. May I learn compassion. May all my friends, family, and those I love be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those troubled in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who have hurt me in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those I have hurt in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all my enemies be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all living beings be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing right here now and reciting the sutras, hearing the Dharma, and training the mind. Great merit is attained. We dedicate this merit to the great Master Shakyamuni Buddha, the all pervading and everlasting three treasures, to the 16 guardians and all protectors of the Dharma and their relations throughout space and time, to all ancestors of this Sangha and all beings in the Dharma world. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance. Let all karma be resolved in the mind, flower bloom in eternal spring. May the Dharma body maintain strength and health, and years of life be lengthened for all teachers of this Sangha. May their vows be fully realized, and may they live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma. We pray for the health and well-being of those suffering from diseases of body, mind, or spirit, those working toward the healing of those afflictions. We especially pray for those suffering from COVID-19, those ministering to them, and for their loved ones. We pray for those suffering from violence and those who grieve for them, for those living in oppression, for all who are imprisoned who should be free, for all refugees from violence, hunger, and catastrophe, man-made or natural. May they be serene through all their troubles, and may we realize the enlightened way together. Sabe sata sadahantu avera sukha jivino katang punya palang maihang sabe bagi bhavantu te. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May all share in the blessings that spring from the good we have done. So I thought that since some of you are in the Monday program, and I think we did Metta Bhavana last week, that we would do Tonglen this week. So if you're not in the Monday program, you can still do Tonglen. We do this periodically. So just get into your meditation posture, whatever that is for you. And take a few nice deep breaths. Particularly focus on letting your Abdominal muscles be nice and soft so your diaphragm can expand and contract freely. Breathing deeply but naturally. And then just let your breath settle just to a comfortable rhythm. And with your attention, this meditation, at your heart, the center of your chest area, around and behind your sternum. And call to mind someone that you know is experiencing some stress and suffering of some form. Someone that you'd like to help. And notice any compassionate feelings that arise naturally when you think of them. And call to mind the suffering that they are experiencing. And imagine that you can see it or experience it in some way with your senses, like as a darkness or a smoke, whatever represents suffering to you. And that it's surrounding their body. And consider yourself breathing that in. So relieving them from it by taking it into your heart with your in-breath. And down into your heart of compassion. And transforming it into freedom from suffering. So perhaps they're sick. Imagine illness and then wellness. Perhaps they're anxious. Breathe in their anxiety. Send them calmness. Maybe they're angry. Take in their anger. Send them friendliness, kindness. And you can imagine the freedom from suffering as a white light or a clear light or a warmth. And you can use the thought, may they be free from suffering. And then consider your own suffering. So maybe there's something specific that you're dealing with. and accept that into your heart of compassion. Self-compassion is important. We often find ourselves more compassionate toward others than toward ourselves. And so let's practice this a little bit. Accepting your difficulties, your suffering, and sending yourself kindness. May I be free from suffering. And bear in mind that we all experience the suffering of birth and death, illness, old age, separation from the loved, association with the unloved, all those things that come with being human. So acknowledge those and your desire to transcend the cycle of suffering. May I be free from suffering. And now think of a loved one. And maybe they're not experiencing anything particular, but like yourself, they have all those pains of growing older, situations they don't like, not getting what they do like. Taking on their frustrations, sending them contentment. And be aware that suffering is caused by poisons like greed, hatred, and delusion too. So if you notice those as we go through this, accept those, relieve them. Take on greed and send generosity. Take on hatred and send loving kindness. Take on delusion and send wisdom. May they be free from suffering. And do the same thing with a friend. May they be free from suffering. And a neutral person, an acquaintance. You may not know them well, but you can imagine the forms of stress and difficulties they experience. We all deal with the same dukkha. May they be free from suffering. And think of an adversary, someone you're not getting along with, someone who annoys you. Maybe you're having some conflict with. Maybe the relative you don't like to see during the holidays. May they be free from suffering. And remember, ultimately, we're wishing them freedom from greed, from hatred, and from delusion. Those are the poisons that keep bringing us back to birth and death, to illness and old age, all those things. May they be free from suffering. And finally, may all beings be free from suffering. And like we do with Metta Bhavana, just imagine all beings. Can think of them in different directions or different kinds of beings, those that walk on the earth or fly in the air and so on. However that works for you. And we're really just wishing for the liberation of all the beings. We chat about that every week. May all beings be free from suffering. So before we end this meditation, just bring your attention back to your breath. Stop the process of sending and receiving. Be aware you have this supply of compassion at your heart all the time. And just turn your attention to your breath through your nose or belly. And just sit for a moment. So I hope that went well for you. So there's some noise going on outside. I think it's the neighbors doing something, but it's irritating the dogs. So you hear the dogs growling and barking in the background. That's what's going. That's what that's about. So yeah, I mentioned, I think last week, this book, Tunneling for Sunlight. And I've been kind of using this as readings with some other groups and stuff. And there's one in here that is kind of relevant to that meditation that I thought I would share this with you. It's short. So the maxim is find compassion for others in your own transgressions. See, can you read that? Find compassion for others in your own transgressions. If you ever want one of those, I think you can order them from the Todo Institute. I'm sure. Anyway, and here's what Greg says about that. There's an element of human nature that is poised to judge others as soon as they fall short of our expectations or ideals. How could she do such a thing? How could he treat me like that? We look down from a pedestal of innocence or self-justification. As we grow older, most of us hope that our hearts will soften, but often they are hard as granite. They harden whenever we condemn people from a position of arrogance, superiority, or self-righteousness. The antidote to a hard heart requires courage and sincerity. It requires us to remember our own human weaknesses and faults. A sincere self-examination makes it possible to soften our hearts toward others because we become familiar with our own transgressions. And when those transgressions rest in the center of our hearts, we can't help but bring the light of understanding and compassion to others. We encounter the faults of others as fellow sinners. I don't like that word sinners, but you know what he means. And we recognize that our ability to transcend our misdeeds is the result of grace, grace which includes the love, support, and guidance of others. Our minds have developed the capacity to justify ourselves while we criticize others for the same acts. If we cut someone off in the next lane, we excuse ourselves with the thought, oh, I didn't see that car. But when someone cuts us off, we react with, hey, you jerk, watch where you're going. You could kill someone. Can you notice the tricks your ego has mastered to make you look good and others look bad? Do you have the courage to bring compassion to the faults of others as well as yourself? So this is helpful when you're trying to generate compassion for a difficult person to recognize our own capacity to be difficult, right? Yeah, and he says this thing at the beginning. He says we look down from a pedestal of innocence or self-justification. So yeah, when we screw up, when we treat someone else badly, often, well, we had a good reason to do that, right? But when someone else treats us badly, well, whatever reason they have is never good enough. So, and again, this is not so that you'll beat yourself up or so that you will, forgive people for doing horrible things to you or whatever, somehow magically let that go, but you can, at least be more realistic about it. So, Nikon is a really good way of doing that. We're going to talk about Nikon in coming weeks in the Monday group. And that's a good way of kind of looking at what trouble am I causing as I'm going through life. But the other thing is too, we do need to have compassion for ourselves. There's a professor who I think happens to be Buddhist, I'm pretty sure. I think she's at the University of Texas in Austin. Her name is Christine Neff, Neff. And she started studying self-compassion when she basically noticed how many of her friends didn't have compassion for themselves, I think, and started looking at this. And so she determined by doing some study and research on it, having graduate students help her do these things and that kind of stuff, that we tend to be really condemning of ourselves. So it's interesting. We manage at one time to be judgmental of others and think that we'll never do these bad things that we're judgmental about. And yet, when we screw up on something that matters to us, we can be really damning of ourselves, right? And as she puts it, that we often are a lot harder on ourselves than we would be on our friends and family and loved ones and so on. So I think we tend to be kind of selective about our compassion and those things we're likely to be compassionate about and toward. So just kind of be aware of that as you're working with these things. We talk in Buddhism all the time about compassion being an important thing. In fact, over there on the altar, there's a pair of those wooden clappers. You clap together to make a noise for walking meditation and stuff. That Dharma Compassion, Paul, the guy next door to White Sands, made for me. I think there's a pair of them in White Sands somewhere too. One of them says wisdom, and one of them says compassion, and it's kind of cool because you bring them together, and you get this really loud clap. It's a lot louder when it's two wood blocks being hit together. And that's the way your practice is. If you bring wisdom and compassion together, like at one, boom, it really can wake you up. But all too often, I think, we think of those things as abstractions. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. And we kind of just talk about that. So when we really are working with it, it's when we notice when we're not being compassionate. And then we try to push ourselves into being compassionate anyway. So what do you do if you're trying to be compassionate towards someone who really has done something terrible to you? It doesn't necessarily mean that that you stop acknowledging that they've done a terrible thing or that they're capable of terrible things. But, it means that we can recognize our own capacity to do really bad things. And so be at least a little bit forgiving toward them from that. So forgiveness is a weird word. I almost don't. I think it's important, but I think that we often kind of misuse it. It is really something that we do in order to transcend our own anger and resentment and stuff like that. It's a way of letting go of the things that are harming us in our states of mind towards something and getting out of a cycle of conflict. It doesn't mean making excuses for someone's bad behavior. It means accepting them as, mistake-making human beings without necessarily accepting what they've done. So Greg Creech, he's a Buddhist, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I know he is. He used to travel with Thich Nhat Hanh, transcribing his Dharma talks and stuff like that. He uses the word sin in here. And, we don't talk about sin much in Buddhism because it has it carries a lot of weight that a lot of people kind of bring with us from other traditions that we'd rather leave behind. This idea of carrying around our sin. But if we think about it in terms of our ability to do terrible things, and therefore, our mindfulness to be aware of that and to maybe not do those terrible things, right? And even those things that are maybe we wouldn't consider too terrible, but that are still harmful or hurtful or so on and so on. And then to recognize ourselves in others in order to for that to be a source for compassion. Then I think that's helpful. So if nothing else, if we can stop this process of judging others and ourselves, especially others, then we save ourselves a lot of work. I think it was Alma Kima. I was reading a thing about judgmentalism from her, and she said, all this judging we do is so much work. It really is when you think about it. When you just think, you know what? Here's the conditions that we have. So this is what we're going to work with. And sometimes those conditions are people that you want to keep some distance from because they're not good people, or they're not people that it's safe to be around, right? So, and then you look at the political situation now and stuff. So how do I have compassion for the guy down the street who's still got the political signs in his front yard? Well, recognize he's doing this out of greed, hatred, and delusion. And not only that, but he probably thinks that I'm screwed up because I don't have political signs in my front yard or whatever. I'm a communist, whatever he thinks, and again, delusion. And I'm just wishing that he was free from that, but also recognize him as a plain old human being just like me. And then I'm not always right either, right? So that helps, I think, to bring a little temperance to this process of having compassion for other people. Anybody got any questions? I see it looks like there's about 15 of you still there. So if there's anything you'd like me to talk about, let me know. I'll give you a few minutes. While I'm thinking about it, I do want to revise the service that we're doing, and I'd like to do it for sure before we start meeting in person again, whenever that's going to happen. But I'd like to go ahead and do it now. And so if there's any of you that would like to have a conversation with me about what we might change, I'd be happy for us to have a little Zoom conference. So just email me and let me know that you're interested in that. And I'm thinking about fairly minor things like I go to the Buddha for guidance. I think that came from Bright Dawn. I don't remember for sure. I don't like it. I liked it when I did this 10 years ago, but I don't like it so much now. It really is sort of it's kind of the refuge ceremony, and it would normally be I go to the Buddha for refuge. But I think whoever put it together, Koyo or somebody, whoever I got it from, I understand, Jeff. And not only that, but there's a lag, between when you type it and when I see it. So discrimination versus judging. What do you mean by discrimination? You mean knowing like the difference between right and wrong, good and bad, skillful and unskillful? not discriminating against other people, but determining what's good or what's helpful and what's not. So the thing is, when we're okay, good. Um, yeah, that's what I thought. So let's say let's say I have a thought arise, um, and I look at that thought and I'm trying to decide, and I recognize this thought, and I'm not sure if that thought and the possible response that I might, the action that I might take as a result of this uh, is good or not. So let's say it's a bad one. Let's say I know for sure it's a bad one. I've had an angry thought arise. The guy down the street with all of the political signs in his front yard. There actually is one of those, by the way. In fact, there's a few of them in my neighborhood. Let's say I think I want to burn his house down. Right. I don't, but let's say that thought has arisen. So that's a bad thought, right? And I want to recognize that as a bad thought. I don't want to judge myself for having it, though. I can say that was an unskillful thought. I want to drop that real fast, right? I don't want to stay in that state of mind, or I don't want to stay with that thought until I create a state of mind that is definitely harmful for me and potentially for him. I mean, I don't know who the guy is or female or family or whatever it is. I just see the house, right? But I could, if I wanted to, take having to see those signs every day as a reason to really develop a strong sense of hatred for that person. So, which would not be a skillful thing to do. Now, suppose I do that anyway. Again, I want to be able to discriminate what's skillful and what's not without damning myself for having an unskillful thought. Does that make sense? So I can evaluate, I can judge, I can discriminate the action, the thought, body, speech, and mind without condemning myself. Now, that doesn't mean I give myself a free pass. I don't say, oh, well, it's just me. I'm having these thoughts. If I don't recognize that those thoughts are harmful, I'm liable to keep them, right? Now, let's say we've got friends who are engaging in that sort of thing. So again, we don't need to judge them, but we can definitely judge that what their actions of body, speech, and mind are not skillful or not helpful and potentially lead to harm. The best example of this conversation I can think of is the Buddha had this conversation with his son Rahula after Rahula ordained. So if you remember, Rahula ordained as a 7-year-old. And so he was still a child, and the Buddha had this conversation with him. And apparently Rahula must have told a lie, because the Buddha started out by saying lying, was that a person who lies not worth very much. Now, he didn't say, Rahula, you're a bad boy. He said, lie, basically a chronic liar is not someone anybody wants to be around. And then he goes into, to actions of body, speech, and mind, and how you evaluate them. So he says this action of body that I'm doing, or that I have done, or that I was thinking about doing, would it lead to my harm or the harm of someone else? And if so, don't do it, or stop doing it. Don't do it again. Would it lead to the betterment of me or someone else? If so, well, Do it. Keep doing it. Do it again. Right. And he goes the same thing with actions of speech and actions of mind. So we don't think in the West, we don't think very much of thoughts as being actions. So there's two things. There's thoughts that arise, and then there's our willful thinking as a response to that. That son of a bitch over there with those signs out in his front yard. Okay. That's just a thought that has arisen. I'm driving down the road, I see it, I have that thought. I drop it. No harm done. It wasn't a willful thought. That son of a bitch over there with those yards. And then for the rest of the way to school or work or whatever, I'm thinking about all of the terrible things that I can imagine about him and the things that I'd like to do to get back to these people who leave these snipe signs in their front yard. That's an action. The first thought doesn't count. It's not karma. It's just something that arose. All the rest of that is an action of mind. So I don't need to judge it. I just need to see that it's unskillful, that it's harmful, that it could lead to my detriment or the detriment of others, and then stop doing it. And don't do it again. Right. So that's the difference between discriminating between skillful and unskillful versus judging. Now, that doesn't do much to help me figure out what to do about the guy with the signs in his front yard. In this particular case, I probably will never meet the person, and I don't really care. So I'm not going to do anything. But one thing to keep in mind is we can never leverage our own spiritual wealth, our merit, off of somebody else's karma, right? So don't get too worried about other people's karma. Worry about your own karma. So what can you do to let go of that which is unskillful and develop that which is skillful? So I hope that was helpful. I just got a message on Facebook from Fred. Wish I could figure out a way to show you. And I think this is great. I wish I could show you this. I guess you can't post images in the chat here, but he just messaged me on Facebook a picture of his cat watching me right now on his phone on YouTube, which is hilarious. Anyway, wish I could share it with you, but maybe I'll download it later and post it on Facebook anyway. Okay. Well, listen, if you got any other questions along those lines, if there's anything I can clarify for you, feel free to join us on Thursdays on Zoom, which are a lot more conversational. And I'm going to close now so that I can go and get back on the couch and prop my knee back up. So thank you very much for coming. Hope you have a good night, and hope to see you again soon.